Hello everyone, Rachel Wagner here, and I am going to be doing my book review and discussion today on The Best American Essays by Leslie Jamison. This is the edition that I got. It's the 2017 version, and I just absolutely love the way that it is laid out, formatted. The topics of the essays are really I don't want to say diverse because they all kind of relate a little bit to each other in some ways, but they're all very unique. I guess that's something I can say. I've really enjoyed the way that this is written. The formatting of it, like I said, is just very clean, and I just like the way that it's organized, and like how it has the author at the top right there, and then the title, and then where it was originally published. I think that that's a very nice touch. It's a nice way to keep all of the essays organized, and I just really enjoyed it. But anyways, I'm going to go through and talk a little bit about the author, but she's not really the author, but the editor of this edition of the Best American Essays, the collection as a whole, some of the things that I noticed as a common theme in the essays, and then we'll dive into the essays, the two that were my most favorite, which were so hard to pick out because I liked a lot of them, and then kind of conclude and talk about some of the themes and things that I've seen within the book, the essay collection, and yeah, so let's get started. Okay, so our editor, Leslie Jamison, she is the author of the essay collection, The Empathy Exams. It's a New York Times bestseller, and she's the author of the novel The Gin Closet, a finalist for the LA Times Book Prize. Her work has appeared in New York Times Magazine, Harper's, and the Oxford American, among others, and she's the columnist for the New York Times Book Review. She's actually a professor. She teaches at Columbia University and lives in Brooklyn with her family, which I thought was awesome because as a fellow professor, I'm like, wow, these are things I could be doing someday in the future, right? So I put little screenshots of all of her works. She is the author of Make It Scream, Make It Burn, which is an essay collection, The Empathy Exams, The Recovering, and The Gin Closet, which I talked about already a little bit. And then, of course, she's the editor of the Best American Essays that we are talking about today. Okay, so in this collection, in this little collection of American essays, some of the main themes that I noticed were life, death, and love. These themes seemed to be in every single one of the essays at some point. They were very evident and something that was talked about a lot, and so that's why I chose them to be my three top topics that I noticed, or themes, I guess, throughout the essays. And then moving on to the essays. So what is an essay? The definition of an essay is a short piece of writing on a particular subject, or, and this is my favorite definition of an essay, it's an attempt or effort, which I just think is so great because it's like, I'm going to attempt to put effort into this and write something that means something, and to me that's just a really cool definition. So in this collection, our editor's opinion, the Best American Essays feature a selection of the year's outstanding essays, essays of literary achievements that show an awareness of craft and forcefulness of thought. To qualify for the volume, the essay must be a work of respectable literary quality, intended as a fully developed, independent essay, not an excerpt, on a subject of general interest, not specialized scholarship, originally written in English or translated by the author, for publication in an American periodical during that calendar year. So these are the requirements that these essays have to make before they're put in these picks in this collection for whatever year that they're in. So whenever we get to my favorites, let's just dive in because these were really good. So the first one is What Came Before the Big Bang, and that's by Alan Lightman. And I'm going to read a little bit from it. because I'm a real big science nerd, being a nurse and being really, really, I don't know what the word is, I guess, deeply involved in science, has just given me a deeper appreciation for our scientists that kind of gave us the world that we know today as far as the research and theories and things like that. So this one, as soon as it started out, it was very interesting to me, and it just kind of sparked my interest and like grabbed me by the first few words. It was originally published in Harper's Magazine by Alan Lightman, and it's called What Came Before the Big Bang, and the starting sentence is, on Wednesday, February 11th, 1931, Albert Einstein met for more than an hour with a small group of American scientists in the cozy library of the Mount Wilson Observatory near Pasadena, California. So right then, I was like, hold up, this sounds really interesting. I want to figure out what Albert Einstein was thinking and talking about and learning about with these fellow scientists. So, continuing on, we learned that the subject was about cosmology. And it's a really, really great essay. If you haven't read this one, if you don't have this edition, or if y'all want to look up this essay, it's just really, really good. My favorite part of it, it talks a lot about order and disorder and chaos and things getting out of order. And my favorite quote in this portion, I guess, is where it says, "It is well known in the science of order and disorder that other things being equal, larger spaces allow for more disorder, essentially because there are more places for things to scatter. So the bigger the space, the bigger the problems. Smaller spaces, therefore, tend to have more order." So that just related to me. I relate a lot of my kind of emotions and connection to my family. And so I thought of like a Thanksgiving meal. Like whenever you have a ton of people over for Thanksgiving, there's a lot of chaos and a lot of disorder, and people are eating turkey, and then they're having fudge and pumpkin pie, and all of these things are happening, and there's so much stuff going on. And then when you have like just your family for a small dinner, like just the four of you, like your parents and your siblings or whatever, it seems like it's so much more calm and more order is definitely apparent. And I know that's kind of a crazy connection, but that's just what it reminded me of. And I think that's why I liked this one so much, because it's talking about science and cosmology the whole time, and we're thinking about these new theories and talking about what happened before the Big Bang, but it just was so relatable about like everyday things in life, and I just really, really, really enjoyed it on a whole other level. And then the end of the essay says, and I quote, "The need to imagine new possibilities, the need to reach out beyond ourselves and understand the world around us, not to help ourselves with physical survival or personal relationships or self-discovery, but to know and comprehend this strange cosmos that we find ourselves in. The need to ask the really big questions. How did it all begin? Far beyond our own lives, far beyond our community or our nation or our planet or even our solar system. How did this universe begin? It's a luxury to be able to ask such questions. It is also a human necessity." I love how the author said it's a luxury to be able to ask these questions, because if you think about the human condition, being a human and being able to question everything, being able to think about where we came from, why are we here, what is our purpose, all of these big, huge questions that everyone thinks about at some point during their life, it is a luxury. It's a luxury to be able to create and develop your life and think about where you came from and where you're going. And really the cosmos we find ourselves in, that's just a beautiful, beautiful quote, and I just absolutely love it. So that is why this one was my favorite, my top number one favorite. My sister is really, really close to the stars, as I always say, She has a very deep relationship with the cosmos, and she likes to just go out and sit on the porch in her pajamas and just listen to the sky. And so that really reminded me of her a lot, which again is why I connected to it, because that's what essays and writing is all about, is connection, right? Okay, and then the next one, I'm going to move on. The next one is called The Sparrow Needy by Kenneth A. McLean. This one was originally published in the Kenyon Review, and this one reminded me of my cousins, which is why I liked it so much. My cousins are 2 years apart, and they live in Indiana, and they're far away, and I hardly get to see them. We see each other once a year, and they are really, really tough on each other, but at the same time, they're going to go to bat for each other. Like, they are absolute best friends. But whenever I read the introductory quote that leads into this essay, it just instantly reminded me of them, and that's why I kept reading it, because it just totally sucked me in from the beginning. But the quote says, "I had a brother, and that says it all." And then it says, "From a conversation overheard on a New York City bus." So just reading that, I was instantly like, oh my gosh, that reminds me of my cousins. And this story deals with a lot of different issues. It deals with life, it deals with death, it deals with murder, it deals with racism and brotherhood and family, and it reminds me a lot of the movie The Bronx Tale. I don't know if you've seen that. It's an older movie. But it just really, like, the setting and the feeling kind of reminded me of that. And it is based in New York, so that was another reason why. But the end of it is my most favorite part. And this is what really, really reminded me of my cousins, because they're like inseparable. They get on each other's nerves and they play around and they have fun. But if anyone else tries to pick on them, they're gonna fight for their brother. And so this just really reminded me of them. But it says, "You are my brother," Paul often said. "You're my brother," and both of us, in good and bad, whatever can be said about us, tried desperately to understand what that implied, to take on the risk of presence, as Baldwin would term it, to bear witness to what we did or did not do. Life is a change of unalterable dalliances and failings, and it is also just as powerfully the tale of drives to Providence and Ithaca, forcades into dangerous clubs by ones who truly ventured there, and by ones who could only venture there as an act of an imagination. And it is just as ineluctably a tale of grace, of happenstance. What is, is. And then he goes on to say, the author says, "The last poem that I published was about my brother Paul. It was written 26 years ago. I haven't composed a poem since, and even there, no matter how much I wished it otherwise, he seemed to vanish." And so that was just like, oh, like the way that ends is just so heartbreaking, like beautiful, but heartbreaking. And you just have to read the whole essay to understand why. But those are my two favorites, and that is why they are my favorites, because there's so much connection. So like I said, for me, what I always connect to in an essay or any literary work is the feeling. The emotion is what it is all about for me. I can relate to something in an essay. I'm going to think, if I can relate to something in an essay, then I'm going to think it's great. I'm sorry, I had a hard time reading that. Every single one of these essays in this collection definitely has that feel factor for me. And then why do we write? Writing is what connects our minds to paper, our thoughts to ink, and our humanity to others. I've always felt a deep connection to words, and writing my words out on paper, in ink, something permanent and unchanging. Words are just very comforting to me, and I realized that even more while I was reading this collection of essays. So even though they're not full-length novels, however, essays have a full-length punch. Much can be said in few sentences, and this proves to me how much power words do have. You can write a few pages of a story and leave an incredibly strong, lasting impression on your readers, and essays do that. And in conclusion, this is one of my most favorite collections, like I said. I have an old textbook I used to read, and it's very similar to this one, and that's what I really, really like.